Hi, seventh graders, welcome back. So today we are going to be doing kind of the same thing that we did yesterday. We're going to be focusing on the 8.3 section where I'm going to go through the reading with you. And then afterwards, I will also go through the worksheets that go with it. As a kind of a reminder again, if you do not have those worksheets filled out, they are on Google Classroom from before spring break. Okay, I shared all those Chapter 8 worksheets with you already, so I don't have to share them again. When we get to chapter 9, as I upload my videos like I'm doing now, I will also make sure that I give you the worksheets that you need at that time. Okay, but the chapter 8 ones were shared with you before spring break, so if you need to either write them down on notebook paper or print them off, they are on the Google Classroom if you just go back a little bit. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go through the reading for section 8.3. If you have not done the assessment questions for 8.2, those are due on Google Classroom, okay, not February, April 16th. All right, so those are due on Thursday, April 16th. The 8.3 assessment questions will be due on Friday, April 17th. All right, and we're moving really fast through chapter 8 because, again, we covered this in class. So I'm kind of just reviewing it for you. That way we can take the assessment on it. I did not think it would be fair to just give you an assessment without reviewing it. So those assessment questions for 8.2 are due on the 16th by 11:59 p.m. And the assessment questions for 8.3 will be due on Friday, the 17th by 11:59 p.m. And again, please turn those in on Google Classrooms. I have assigned them to you under classwork. So all you have to do is open that document, fill it out, and hit submit so I can give you a grade. Make sure you're using complete sentences and all that good stuff that we do in class. You do not have to do the vocab words anymore. It just doesn't really serve a purpose with the format that we're doing this. Okay? All right, moving on to 8.3 for today. Again, if you have questions about 8.2, please email me or set up a Zoom time, whatever you need to do. All right, 8.2. So 8.3. 8.3 is really just the same thing as 8.2, but instead of focusing on the United States culture, we are focusing on Canada's culture, okay? The Canadian mosaic is what the section is titled. So the first difference that the section wants to make on page 227, if you are following along with me, which I recommend, is that the United States is often called a melting pot when we talk about immigration because most of the immigrants that move to the United States try to blend in, and we try and make one big culture that kind of unites us together, right? Well, Canada is a little bit different. Rather than calling themselves a melting pot, they call themselves a mosaic. And what that means is, if you know what a mosaic is rather than blending together in that melting kind of soup pot looking thing where everything becomes one, mosaics are pictures that are made up of smaller objects or other pictures. Okay, so they're taking each individual person's culture or each individual group's culture and they're putting them together to make one big picture, but they're not blending them. Okay, so those people, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, in Canada who have French heritage or who have native Inuit heritage, they don't have to blend into everybody else's heritage. They keep their own and make one big picture out of that. So it's a little bit different versus the United States being that one melting pot where we all try to become one big culture versus Canada having that mosaic type picture of culture. Okay, moving on to page 228, it talks about the people of Canada. The first ones we're going to speak about is the French Canadians. Now, as we've talked about in class, the largest French part of Canada is going to be Quebec. Okay, and it sounds French, right? Quebec sounds French. In Quebec, there are a huge number of French people because that is originally who had controlled that region of Canada, would be France. Okay, so when you get to places like Quebec, the capital of Quebec is Quebec City. Okay, the road signs are both in English and French because those people want to maintain their French heritage. Okay, they don't want to blend into everybody else, and that's where that mosaic thing comes in. They don't want to be the same. They want to be part of Canada, or we'll talk about that in a second, but they're part of Canada, but they also want to maintain the fact that they speak French in Quebec. Okay, now what I was talking about earlier is getting to Quebec. Quebec has tried to actually become its own country a few times from Canada. And the reason why is because the rest of Canada speaks English as a majority versus Quebec speaking French. And they feel that their culture would be better served if they had broken away and kind of become their own country. Of course, Canada did not let that happen. Quebec is still part of Canada and probably always will be. Okay, it's very difficult to break away from a country like that. Another group, a large ethnic group that you're going to find in Canada would be those Native people. Okay, and one of the large Native groups within northern Canada is going to be those Inuit people. Inuit people are natives that were obviously one of the first people among North America. They were great hunters, gatherers, and craftsmen or craftswomen. Okay, they were able to make things that they needed in order to survive. And they were very good at that. Okay, in fact, it became part of their heritage. They were able to create these extravagant places to live and tools and things like that. Of course, as times have changed, tools aren't necessarily, you don't have to make them anymore, right? You can buy them. You don't have to make your own clothes anymore. You can buy them. So a lot of those Inuit people feel that because you can buy these things now, it actually takes a little bit away from their culture because they don't have to do this stuff anymore. And that was what they were really, really good at. Okay, so we've talked about French Canadians, we've talked about Native Canadians. Of course, a large percentage of the 31 million people that live in Canada, as of earlier in the 2000s, I'm not exactly sure on that number right now, are going to speak English. Okay, and they're going to have European roots as well, because many of the immigrants do come from Europe as well as Asia if we go to the West Coast. So there's a lot of Native people, French cultures there, English culture, other European cultures, as well as Asian cultures. Okay, so it's a very diverse country, just like the United States, but rather than blending together, they kind of form that mosaic, which is a big picture out of a lot of small ones. Okay. Moving to page 230, the last thing about Canadian culture that we're going to talk about is the sports and kind of entertainment in Canada. Okay, just like the United States, sports and entertainment are a very large factor in Canadian culture. I'm sure you all know some famous Canadian actors or singers. Some of the ones that the books list that are a little bit probably older than your generation are like Celine Dion and Shania Twain. I'm sure maybe you've heard of them if you like that style of music. Okay, obviously the most famous sport in Canada is probably going to be what? Hockey, right? So hockey, and it talks a little bit about like the Stanley Cup, playing in the NHL, which is a combination of both American and Canadian teams. Okay, hockey is a very popular sport, just like football is in the United States. It does point out in the Canadian culture section that one thing that Canadians may feel, okay, is that the United States has too much input on their culture, which means that for example, let's go with sports here, okay? Football is very popular in the United States, and because it is, Canada actually has its own form of football called Canadian football. It's got a little bit different rules. They play the game a little bit differently. But that's because football is so popular in the United States that it has an influence on Canada. And some Canadians do not like the fact that the United States has such an influence on the culture of Canada. Okay. This is a rather short section, so it didn't take me long to get through it. If you have questions about anything that I talked about, make sure you either email or set up a time to talk to me. Those assessment questions on page 230 are due on April 17th, that's Friday, at 11:59 p.m. Make sure you complete 8.2 assessment questions as well on April 16th by 11:59 p.m. Those are your two assignments. They are worth points. If you look in PowerSchool, I have entered all of the assignments that you will have for the rest of the school year. That way you can see all the assignments, what dates they're due on, all that good stuff. Okay, I've tried to make it all laid out as easy as possible and scheduled as easy as possible for students. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do, just like yesterday, is I'm going to go through those worksheets for you. If you have to get your worksheets out, now would be a good time. I'll give you a few seconds while I get mine ready to kind of pause the video and get your 8.3 worksheets out so we can go over them. All right. Okay, so the first thing that we'll go over is the Reading Readiness Guide for 8.3, and this is one of the true-false sheets that we've done in class. Okay, so if you have not done this, make sure you print them off of Google Classroom or use notebook paper. If you don't have a printer, that's fine, right? Just you can look at the PDF on your phone or your computer and then write the answers down on a piece of scratch paper or notebook paper. All right. Number one, Canada has a population of more than 100 million people. That is going to be false, right? 31 million people as of the early 2000s. Two, special laws promote French culture in Quebec. That is going to be True, right? They have things like road signs that promote French culture so they do not lose it. 3, many French Canadians want Quebec to become a separate country. That is also true. Okay. 4, Canada's Inuits feel that they are losing traditional skills. They are losing their identity. They also feel that's true. Remember, we talked about how because they don't have to make their own tools or their own clothes anymore, that they're losing those skills, which are part of their culture. All right, 5, Canada has made a special effort to encourage people to be Canadian and express their ethnic heritage at the same time. That is true. That's that mosaic we were talking about. They want you to be, hey, I'm Canadian, but they also want you to hang on to that culture that you have. So if you recently immigrated from, let's say, a country in Asia, you are now Canadian, but they also want you to hang on to that Asian culture, whatever country you may have come from, and they want you to continue to promote that. That way you become part of that mosaic. And 6, most Canadians would like the United States to have more influence on their culture. That is false. Remember, we talked about how lots of Canadians feel that the United States has too much influence on their culture. All right, I'm going to go over the guided reading and review next. What is one difference in the way the United States and Canada view immigration? The United States views immigration as that melting pot. Okay, we blend everybody together to try and make one big culture, versus Canada is making that mosaic, which is lots of cultures put together to make one big picture, but they don't mix. 2, what are the French Canadians of Quebec concerned about? They're concerned about losing their French heritage, right? That's why they continue to pass laws that allow them to do things in French, so they do not forget that they do have lots and lots of French culture there. 3, why do many French Canadians want Quebec to become? They want them to become independent or their own country. That way Canada doesn't feel the need to stop French culture, which they do a good job of promoting. 4, what recent laws have been passed that help preserve First Nations culture? Laws have been passed so that like the Native Americans or Native Inuits can use their language in their schools, which is a big deal, right? You don't have to speak a language that doesn't promote your culture. So if you are an Inuit and you want to speak the Inuit language in your school, you can now do that in Canada, which is a fantastic thing, right? 5, how were Canada's Inuits able to survive for centuries in the Arctic? They were great hunters and gatherers. They were able to make their own tools. They made their own clothes. Okay, and they of course stayed together as a group of people, which allowed them to get things done together. All right. 6, what has happened to the population of Canada since World War II? It has doubled. 7, identify the 2 cities in Canada that many Asian immigrants have settled in. That will be Vancouver, British Columbia, and Toronto. Yes, Toronto. Okay. What is one cultural issue that unites most Canadians? Okay, one cultural issue that unites most Canadians is that they feel that the United States has too much influence on their culture. Okay, they want to maintain that they are Canadians. They are not the same people as the Americans, although they are very, very similar. Vocab words, melting pot. Melting pot is what we talked about in the United States, where all the cultures come together and we try to make kind of one big one. And then we have a reserve, which is where oftentimes Native Americans were asked to move to if their land was taken from them. Okay, finally we have the 8.3 notes, which I'm kind of going to do similar to yesterday. I have the 2 vocab words on top for you to fill out, and then it's a list style notes. Okay, so you're going through the paragraphs where I have in big red letters, the people of Canada, followed by the first paragraph, French Canadians. Find 2 important details that you think are important and fill those in. And then also for B would be the next paragraph and then 2 important details. C is the next paragraph and 2 important details. All right. We've done these notes lots. You should have a good idea of how to do them. I'm not going to go through each specific detail because your important details might be very different from mine. Okay. So that pretty much brings me to my review of 8.3. Okay, if we look at our class calendar for tomorrow, it would be Monday, April 20th. Okay, let me check here, get my calendar. We have on April 20th is the Chapter 8 Quizlet review. Okay, so on there, I will not have a video on the 20th. What I will have, though, is those Quizlet reviews that we do in class. and I will have them posted to the Google Classroom. I want you to use them to play those games like Gravity or Match or Test or Review. Okay, that way you get all those terms down, you get a good review for the assessment that will be happening on the 21st and 22nd. Okay, so that will be your assignment for Monday. I will, of course, post it this weekend. Okay, so if you have any questions about anything that I've talked about today on 8.3 or 8.2 or either assignment, remember you have the 8.2 and 8.3 assessment questions due. The 8.2 were due yesterday, April 16th, and the 8.3 will be due tonight at 11:59, April 17th. Okay? If you have questions, please make sure you are contacting me at my email. That is stensvin@markzan.k12.wi.us. Okay, I am pretty quick to respond and I can make sure I get you any information you need. Also, video numbers are not great. It's only about half the students are watching these. Okay, if you know that a friend has not been doing something that they're supposed to be doing, please get them or ask them or whatever you need to do. Let me know. Okay, I'll take care of it. You don't have to be the person to do it. Let me know and I will take care of it. Just make sure, because this is important, right? This stuff is now graded. It's not optional anymore, okay? We need to try and learn as much as possible the rest of this year so we can all become better students and teachers. Okay, that being said, I hope you all have a great weekend and stay healthy, okay? Let me know if you need anything. Bye.